not a good microphone speaker again, so. Louder? How about now? Is that all good? Now I can actually hear myself talk. That's not good. Okay, good morning. Thanks for taking the time to stay after a bit and talk about the future of the church here. So we've got some things to share with you this morning. Some of the conversations are a little bit hard to hear, but we're all about transparency. So want to make sure that you've got visibility to what's going on. Some of the thoughts that our design team had. So really speaking mostly on behalf of the design team. So these aren't all Scott's ideas and thoughts today. So. But I was the only one that was willing to talk today, so no, I'm just kidding. But before we get started, in the spirit of being flexible and agile, we have just one announcement that Carol wants to address the group here before we get started. So hot off the press here.
I don't really want to be here saying this, but I'm here for personnel, and I have a letter to read. Dear personnel, back on June 8th, I sent personnel an email about some big changes in my family's life. I'm excited to go back to school and leave her job at Scott County Jail to pursue a degree in architectural engineering. However, it has us needing health insurance. With much thought and discernment, my phone is not cooperating, I have accepted a job at Clock Inc. that meets to cover the needs we have as a family. The cost was too high for us to purchase insurance, and I needed a job that offered benefits. I regret to inform you that my last Sunday at FCC is September 4th, and my last day is September 8th. Sincerely, Lindsay Speaks.
Yeah, so I don't know how I follow that, so I'm a little shaky here. So Lindsay's still here with us. I'm going to contribute, but thought we ought to just get it out there so everybody kind of heard that message. All right, here we go. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the financial situation. You guys have seen many of these slides already, so just to level set and make sure we're all on the same page of what we're talking about. We'll talk a little bit about path follow-up. So we had some different options of things that we were talking about from a revenue generation standpoint. How do we fix our finances? So we'll talk just a little bit about that. Talk about a couple of the options that we have moving forward, and these are some of the options that we did send out, I believe. So you guys have seen a preview of that, so that'll be some of the conversation today for sure. The design team has put together a recommendation on what option we think would be best for us right now. So just also keep in mind that those options are really high level. There's not a lot of detail worked out underneath them right now, but just really directional. So we'll have a recommendation, and then there will be a follow-up meeting 2 weeks from now to really vote or just gain alignment on what direction we take. So we're not going to vote or anything today. Today's really informational and just to get some maybe other thoughts out there from the congregation. But in 2 weeks, we really are going to pick a direction. So I should also mention, as part of this as well, as part of the three different options, I do have a slide to talk a bit about calling a pastor as well. So in case you're wondering about that, I'm no expert, but I've been coached on a little bit on what all of this means. So maybe just one other thing before I get too far. Pastor Becky's not here today. Don't read anything into that. I know some folks have, questioned on whether or not, she's part of this thing going forward and helping us work through this. I can assure you that she's been highly aligned with everything that we put together, very engaged in the conversation. So it just happens that she couldn't be here today, and most of the design team could be here. So, okay. So I'm going to try to go through this so people I understand are taking comments and questions from the phones as well. So I'll do my best to try to work through it. So this slide, again, you've seen before. Try to duck a little bit. So this is what the future looks like if we keep down the current trajectory. So the endowment shrinks over time. So you can see the bar graph there. So we've got about 5, 6, 7 years, depending on how fast some of these things go, right? If nothing changes, that's what it looks like. So one thing to note on here is the additional $130,000. So there's a 5 down, 4 or 5 down. There's $130,000. So normally every year we're taking that extra, or that 5% from the endowment that we're allowed to without a vote, right? This year we took $130,000 on top of that out, right? So assuming that nothing changes, and we need to do that every year, so we've got to fix that $130,000 gap, right, in the operating budget. So what you see here is on the left side there's that orange bar, so that's the $130,000. I know some of the writing's small on here, and the intent is not to go into the detail of every one of those pieces, but just to kind of show you what it would take to make that $130,000 deficit up. So going through these, I'm not going to go through every one of them, but again, it just kind of gives you directionally what it would take. So weddings, there's all kinds of talk about weddings, right? Everybody talks about weddings and it's going to solve our financial issues. I put together, again, just on my own, put together a few assumptions on what I thought we might be able to bring in a year, say $20,000, right? So that's how that first blue piece stacks up against the rest of that orange bar, right? So that's how much of that deficit it would make up. And then if you move over kitchen lease, I think the Gary Bull, there's an update this week, and they're talking about that $8,000 update, or $8,000 annual income. So that's how that would contribute to making up that $130,000. So I also want to, there's some bigger pieces in here that there is no plan for, but just trying to figure out, what other ideas did the team have to try to close that $130,000 gap. So sharing staff. So this thing really never got off the ground for us, but this would be working with another congregation to share some staff, whether it be pastoral or administrative, whatever it means. But we just put in $25,000 savings for that. So again, hasn't gotten any further than that, but just an assumption that we put out there. There's also some information about, if we grow the number of members in the church, if we ask everybody to donate 10% more a year, that's what that would look like, right? So those are all those little things that we could do to stack up to eventually possibly get to that $130,000 gap. And then there's a couple other pieces over here. So as you have weddings and things like that, you also have more expenses, so that starts to detract again from your overall success rate. So again, my whole point of this slide is really to show you that $130,000 is a pretty big deal, and all those little pieces that it would take to close that gap financially. So the next slide here is on some of the things that we've talked about in our past meetings. So the different paths that we had talked about. So sharing building and staff. This really didn't get too far. We've had a couple of very, very high-level conversations with some other congregations, but never really got too far, right? So we didn't have a lot of people standing up and coming in to volunteer to go explore those options and really dive into details with other congregations. So that honestly really never got off the ground. It's still being talked about a little bit, but hasn't gotten much traction. From a business and events perspective, so this could be the weddings, but then everything else, right? There were a lot of thoughts about maybe having food trucks in the parking lot or other events in the church, renting out the church. So the last time we met here as a group in June, we asked for volunteers, and we ended up getting 2 people to volunteer, but those are people that are heavily engaged, I would say, already in different parts of the church. So spread pretty thin already, but just having trouble finding people that are excited about doing something like that and managing that, right? So not a lot of traction there. And then the last piece of that was really a focus on going out and looking at what are successful churches and how do we retain members and attract new members. So I would say within the design team, there's probably the most energy around that. And I think, there was a summer service that Becca kind of led for us, and I think there was some great energy behind that. But it's not big enough, right? It's not, I don't know that we are able to attract new members and fix the financial problem, right? I think it did a lot of great things, but I don't think it's big enough to be able to solve that chart that we just looked at, right? So overall, just a lack of volunteers and/or paid staff. So it could be one or the other. So just a comment at the bottom, right? So folks are not interested in these options or don't have enough time or energy to grab and run. So I don't know. That's not really a bad thing at all, right? It's just acknowledging what it is. Having a hard time finding people to step up and lead some of these activities. You know, when people can be out doing mission work or volunteering or feeding people or reading to people or something like that, who wants to work on coordinating renting out a building, right? So I get it. So what we thought as a design team is, well, we kind of know what we know, right? So we need to, it's time to make an intentional decision on what we want to do next as a congregation. So right now it feels like we hit a little bit of a wall. You know, we've kind of explored, we had a lot of ideas, but we don't really have the energy to get into each one of those things and each one of those 10 things to make up that $130,000 gap. So we need to make a decision. So right now, a lot of energy on solving the financials. You know, the design team is trying to fix this. Not only the design team, but there's others that are continuously working on what can we do to save a little bit of money around the church here. And then I think that last bullet too, you know, while we're continuing to churn, there's a lot of worry amongst all of us here about what's next, where are we headed? Everybody wants to know where we're headed. So I think continuing to do the same thing is not going to benefit any of us, right? Folks are going to leave because we're frustrated, we don't have good direction. So the thought is we need to make a decision on something. So we as a design team, any questions or anything, thoughts on the phone yet? Everybody might be asleep, sorry. So here we get to the three different options on what we're able to do. Again, this is what we thought of as a design team. So again, very high level. We don't have the details worked out of each of these things, but very high level, this is what they are. So leave a legacy, and we've named these. There's no intention behind the naming or anything like that, so don't get too hung up on those names. But leave a legacy, a swirl, and the massive mission. So I'm going to go a little bit out of order. So Amber, this is where I said I was going to flip. So I'm going to go into 2, 3, and then back to 1. So the swirl option is kind of doing what we're doing now. Way Forward focuses on fixing the financials by those small wins. So all, you know, that $130,000 bar that we showed, trying to make each of those little projects work, right? How do we get people to give a little bit more? How do we get a few more members? How do we get weddings? It's a lot of little things to be able to make that up. So trying to find people to lead those activities without spending too much more money. So our fear then is that it will ultimately result in attrition of membership and mission. So again, really not a big direction. We're trying to chunk away at those little bitty problems and we get frustrated and are we really gonna solve it? So that's our fear there. So we call that option swirl, right? Just do more of the same. I'll talk about the massive mission piece and then I'll go back to leave a legacy. So the massive mission piece is kind of the all in. I'll read what's on the slide here because I think everybody got it sent out and then I'll talk a little bit more about it. So all in, focusing on mission and ministry in the community with the hope that it might revitalize the congregation. We require the congregation to come to an agreement about a new focus of ministry utilizing our best resources, so food insecurity is an example, to withdraw money from the endowment to support this ministry and potentially a full-time staff position to direct this effort. So what this is this is asking for funding out of the endowment to bring someone in to have them lead an effort, possibly around food ministry. So have somebody come in and lead an effort to help, you know, get some excitement in here and free up, you know, what others are doing to lead those things. But it would put somebody at the forefront to be able to set up different volunteer activities so that we could plug into those. So I think we have been very successful, I think, as a congregation when someone organizes something, we can usually attract people to come in and plug in, right? So I think it's a realistic option there. So And I'll talk a little bit more about that details of that massive mission in a second here. But it would be essentially a commitment from the endowment to get staff, not sure exactly what the staff is, but then also some funding to support the mission itself. So then I'm going to hop back to the Leave a Legacy. So I'll just read these as well because these words have been crafted a bit from the team, so I don't want to miss something in me rambling here. So leaving a legacy this way forward recognizes that we simply do not have the financial resources to continue ministry longer than 5 or 6 years into the future. Closing FCC is not a failure, but a recognition that its current ministry has run its full course, that it has been a great source of love and hope for over 100 years, and that God is simply trying to do something new. The goal is to retain outside help to assist us in closing gradually over the next 5 to 7 years, and to intentionally focus our remaining resources on leaving a legacy in the community. So I'll just elaborate a bit on that. So what's the difference between that and the option number 2? So this one, I believe really it helps us if we would choose this option, right? So I have no idea where people are right now, but if we would choose this option, it would help us get over that hump of worry, right? Of when it's gonna happen? Are we actually gonna get through this thing? It would, we'd put a realization out there that, say 6 years, we'll be out of funding, right? But over those next 6 years, we could do a tremendous amount of the work with the community, right? There's an awesome amount of outreach we could do, and now we're not focusing on keeping the train running, if you will. So we could focus on giving back to the community in some great ways. So that's the difference, as I see it. Okay, so how does that, calling a pastor, again, not an expert here, but I knew there'd be some questions on it. Some people tipped me off. So just wanted to talk a little bit about what each of these options mean. And it's changed a little bit, I think, since even some of the leadership circle had met. So I guess in all options, it really means that I think we could begin calling a pastor as soon as we determine what our direction is, whether it's option 1, 2, or 3. I mean, obviously, depending on what direction we take, could lead to a very different profile that we create. But that's I think we could do that in any of the options, right? Most likely would need to be a termed pastor, meaning a 2 or 3 year commitment or something like that. So just because of the way that the current financials look, it would have to be we could guarantee you work for X amount of years, something like that. Man, I'm gonna keep going, we'll be out here in no time. So as we talked as a design team, there was, when you get into a meeting with 7, 8, 9 people, not everybody's on the same page right away, right? So there's a lot of great conversation, and I think we all gave our opinions of which option we thought, and what would fly with the congregation, and we weren't all quite there, but we left that meeting all being aligned on what we were going to recommend, right? So there's all tweaks to those different options, but here's what we thought. The massive mission. So here I'll talk a little bit more about it. So the recommendation would be that we would kick off a team to create that. So we would have a new team generated to design that, right? So I mentioned many times that we don't have all those details worked out yet, but this would be, we'd have to create a team to get this, to somebody to design what it would look like, what kind of person do we want to hire, hire staff, so it could be full-time, could be part-time, don't know yet. The initial ask would be, let's commit to 2 years, so all of 2023 and 24. So let's give it everything we've got for the next couple of years, essentially, and then take another snapshot of what it looks like in 2024. At the end of those 2 years, have we been able to make progress? We aligned on food security as the mission that we could all focus on and get behind. There's all different ways that we can attack that, all the way from all parts of our congregation, children to up through, right? We could all find different missions to support that food insecurity. Budget, I started with $150,000 a year, so I don't know if that's right on or not, but you know, you could hire a person, commit to 2 years, and would also leave you funding to go buy food, right? Support the mission itself. And then it would be something that that third to last bullet there, not calling someone to come in and fix it, right? So it would still need us to make this work, right? So we talked a lot about the grape skins today, right? And how it's not just one person that's going to make or break us. So, but if we could have someone to come in and create a structure for us to get behind and energize us and give us opportunity to all plug in when we can and when we're able to, that's the intent there. So obviously the big elephant in the room here is the risk and reward with that option, right? So the risk, Scott, you just told us we had no money and we're running out of money, right? So now you're telling us to spend it faster. So obviously if nothing happens and we're not able to retain membership and ask people to give a little more and attract new members, then yeah, then we could be in trouble. We could run out of money even sooner than doing nothing. So certainly a risk. The potential reward, we have some new energy, and you know, we have something that we can all get behind and plug into, get back into the community, and make this place an attractive place for new folks to come. So that's the thought there. So then, again, just the next meeting on what we'll talk about is what direction do we want to take as a congregation. So that'll be in 2 weeks. So I didn't put all these slides together, so I don't need to be recognized, but I know there's a lot of good people that did good work on the design team. So recognition for those folks that have done a lot of work to help put this stuff together. Reach an agreement on which of the paths to take forward. So that's what we want to do in 2 weeks from now. So we decided to really split this up and have 2 meetings as opposed to jamming it all into one, because the design team has had a lot of time to kind of soak on this and make sure, you know, go home and think about it and think about what option we can really get behind. So that's why we didn't want to force anybody into a decision today. It gives some people time to think about it. Yeah, and then establish new teams to implement whatever we decide to do. So that's all that I had. Thoughts, questions, comments? Who are the design team members? So if you're on the design team, can you stand up or raise your hand?
Why don't you say the name?
Lizzie.
Tanya, Christine, Becca, Brad, Amanda, and Kimberly, Cliff. I almost called you Clark, sorry. Cliff. Anybody else?
Okay.
I'm Russ. I want to first of all thank the design team. I think what you've done is provide great direction for us. And I think the overview is what we need. We need to be at the high level. So I think you had the right focus in what you did. I have spent a lot of time thinking about what things can make this happen in the church, and it falls right in line, I think, with what was presented today. I saw more of a community service mission, not unlike your food, but a little different take on it, in which I would like to put together an idea for you that says we're going to use the community and set up programs within the church that draws the community in. And as an example, I think we did this one time. Older? There we go. Okay. Got to eat this thing, man. We at one time had a program in which we had artwork from kids in the schools that came in here, and I wasn't involved with it, but I assume we looked at it, judged it, gave some sort of prizes for it. And that is kind of the concept that I'm building on, is if we can have programs where we have kids from the local schools come in and participate in programs similar to that. It may be a music program in which we offer our fine sanctuary for members of the high school or junior high, whatever groups it may be, to come in and have a performance here. We can go on and on with that. The idea is that we draw people to the church with programs that we're helping them put on. The other thing, my wife went to a church when she was visiting in Arizona, and that church had a program in which they were helping people put together resumes to network and basically advance in the workforce. I know we have talent for that. So that's another idea. Singles, single parents. There's just all kinds of things that we can pull people in here on, and hopefully some of them will stay. But that's not the criteria of what we're looking at. Our criteria is to serve the community and provide opportunities to bring them here. In terms of finances, one of the things I thought of, my son works at Cheyenne Camper, and I thought, what if we have a raffle and we raffle off a camper? Average camper is about $60,000, and I did some quick numbers, but if you sold tickets for $10, I think it was $10 a ticket, $100 a ticket, and if every member found 10 people to buy a raffle ticket, and we can still go out into the community, similar to the raffles that are done for homes. You could probably raise $50,000 on that raffle alone. And that's a raffle that could be done every year. Certainly would bring awareness of the church into the community. Oh, the final one was, I think that it would behoove us to look at a new service format. I did go and visit the, Sally, you're going to have to help me on this, Coram Deo, a mega church type format with theater seats and et cetera. But one of the things that I found interesting was that they had provided all their music at one time. They had about a half hour of singing. Then they had a service, and then they had a little singing afterwards. And I thought, well, maybe that's something that we could build on. Becca mentioned to Marcella one time about having a, I'm going to miss the term now, an express service. And that, I thought, you know, that's great. Maybe we just need to look at a different way of doing things in terms of our service and how we do it. And maybe we have a format where you come in and you have Sunday school for a shorter period of time, but then you have family services where they can go and listen to the choir, you can go to a sermon, and then maybe you have another different type of choir. It gives us more flexibility as we hopefully grow to bring in non-traditional service options for music. So I think that I think that this congregation can step up, and I also believe that we may need to hire someone. I'm not opposed to that concept, but I think that there's things that we can do to bring people into this church. That's the only criticism I have, is I don't think the food and sending food out to the community, while a worthwhile cause, I don't think it really provides the kind of energy we need here. That's my thoughts.
Thanks for that. Yeah, I think you have a really good point on that community aspect. I think, yeah, I don't know how to follow that, but yeah, as opposed to the food side of it, I think we need to think about that.
This is a comment from Carol Dyer. How would our food program be different from the multitude of programs already working?
Yeah, I don't know the details. Any thoughts from the design group? I mean, on the food perspective?
There's always a need for food, and I don't know the. Got to be really close? Is that what you're telling me? Okay, sorry. There's always a need for food in the community, and there's always, it seems like there's groups that are coming up to do things, and there's groups that run out of the energy and they're fading away from it. So we can be one of those groups that is coming back up into it and hopefully getting some energy to stay in that position for a while. So we would have to coordinate with the other groups that are out there doing things. But I think we could fill in some of the gaps that are out there right now.
Maybe I'll just, oh geez. Add to that, right? Don't get hung up on the food aspect of it. I think, the food thing is what we had talked about as a design team, but if we could get behind the community engagement thing or whatever that may be, I wouldn't let the food steer you in the direction of which option we pick.
This comment is from Kim Mitchell. She suggests, in terms of revenue, that we look at Red Wagon rent/separate space from church.
So it was around the Red Wagon, right? The question was around, or was just a statement around looking at the revenue that we're getting from Red Wagon? Yeah, so I think what I would read into that is just how are we, working with Red Wagon? Is there opportunity for them to do something different with Red Wagon?
Steve Skipper's here. So I'm not sure about the nature of that question either, but I would point out that Red Wagon pays their way. And it's considered by many of us as one of the basic missions of the church. It supports the children of the church, but it also has scholarships. And so I would be hesitant to try and milk Red Wagon to cover our financial problems. So while I'm here, I would like to give a hip hip hooray to what Russ said, because I think he got at the nature of what the design team was wanting to do, which is really engage with the community. And so perhaps what we're really talking about is some sort of staff member or some sort of group that's really entitled to community engagement. We have attempted to lay this on to outreach and mission, but it's not really a job for a part-time board. And so we continue to do those things that work, and I would also say we should not be ashamed of the work that we do every year for mission. There are so many little things going on here that we should take pride in. Can we do more? Absolutely. So I just want to kind of add my support for what Russ said about this is really about community engagement. And then one other thing, and I'll shut up. I'm not sure I see those three choices as mutually exclusive. We can leave a legacy, we can continue to work on costs, and we can re-engage with the community. Building and Finance continues to examine almost every contract that the church has written. And I can tell you right now, our contracts were written for a church about 3 times our size. We're spending too much on waste disposal. We're spending too much with Cintas. You know, we quit having the lawn mowed each year for $6,000, and we have a number of volunteers who are making that up. So we can whittle it down. We can't solve it, but we can extend that time period. So I really like the conversations we're having today, and thank you, Scott.
I would like to make a couple comments first, then I want to talk about our building. And that there are churches out here that are filling needs of the people. We're not filling the needs of the people. My one daughter goes to a church and they're having a Bible study on Wednesday night on Revelations. They had 300 people show up for it that come every week. They offer a potluck dinner once a month for a certain age group, but it's a fellowship that they come once a month on Friday night. Sarah was a gift of God when we had her, and she was out there. We've had ministers here that never called on a sick person, an elderly person. That wasn't a thing. I remember growing up, Reverend Hollis felt his flock was the most important thing that he had. And if somebody was in need, they were fill that need. So we're not reaching out. There are people in our community that have a need, that need our service, and that. So we need to look at that. We've been able to get out for 2 years, but there's always somebody from church stopping, and that. So we're not reaching the need for these people. So that's one thing that we need to think about. But I talked to Joan, and that's about this, since they are renting, they're the ones paying to move into the other church. Maybe it would help if our committee talked to them. Well, Father Larson died earlier this year, and this last month they lost 2 of their other men that was on the committee, but she's inquiring to see if there's someone that can talk to our committee to let them know how it worked out for them. Our neighbor across the street has had their sanctuary condemned by the city, and they weren't going to be able to do anything with it. So they decided they'd tear it down and rebuild the building part on 6th Avenue, here is the newer portion. So they have 3 floors. The school is on top, and that they have a wonderful meeting room, a hospitality room and kitchen on the 2nd floor. They have a chapel and office on the outside. They have their parking lot, but they can't use their sanctuary. They looked at Sam's building thinking maybe that might work and decided it wouldn't. And so I got thinking one night, and so I called my youngest daughter for contacts. I know a lot of the people there. I went as a child there, and I know the one couple that's on the committee. I know the 2 brothers that are on the committee, and I knew their family before I knew Sally's grandparents or parents. So I called Sally, and also there's Dane Mars. So I called them to let them know that we're looking for someone to share our church. Sally said, I never thought of that. She said, I think it's a wonderful idea. You have a beautiful, beautiful church. I've been in there. We have a lovely sanctuary, beautiful windows, organs. We've got a building we've kept in good condition. So I don't know what kind of, Joan didn't know what they're paying in Rock Island. But when I talked to Sally, I talked to Pastor Becky and told her before I called Sally. Sally said, well, I'll talk to the different ones on our committee. I think it's a wonderful idea. If they go ahead and now the city has allowed them to redo the sanctuary, but it's going to take at least 6 months and $1 million to do it. So they're right across the street from us. They have a need, and we have a need. And so I don't know do you have any idea? And we can find out what they do in the Rock Island Church. There's a church in Davenport where 2 congregations share the same building. So we're not unique in not being able to afford to keep this. I think God has polished us and prepared us for something great and fabulous. And I don't think means phasing out our ministry, and that we don't have to be giant if we feel the needs are small, but that we need to look at our financials. So do you have any idea what kind of rent, or we could find out from maybe the church in Davenport how they worked it out. Find out from the Rock Island, they've been through this. And that, I don't know what kind of income we could add. You mentioned 25,000 of your budget there. Do you think we could get that amount of money sharing our church with another church?
Yeah, I mean, those are all great questions, right? Trying to share a church in a building, and I kind of mentioned at the beginning of those slides.
But I think we talked to some people that have done it, maybe to answer some of our questions.
Sure.
And maybe we don't need that.
Sure. The design team vetted that with other volunteers. There's not enough volunteer manpower within the congregation to follow through on any of those with the attention and time needed.
Well, I will follow up over there if you want me to, and talk to them.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And this is a years and years long process. So yeah, absolutely. We're working to vet that.
We can find out what they're paying in Rock Island and in Davenport, or get some idea what is feasible for work on that. Because certainly are offering a beautiful building that's been taken care of.
Yep.
If we could get the specifics of the two congregations,
Okay.
My turn. I'm Brad Dye, design team, and I'm going to follow up with what Ross talked about with food. Yes, we don't want to be the grocery cart church that goes out to the street and blocks traffic for 3 hours, and they meet maybe once a week, which is great. They do great things, but I want to be more hands-on, and I want to maybe Bible study, maybe bring that in. We suggested, all of us kind of agreed that everybody remember the Empty Soup project at Moline High School, which is no longer after Joe Reiser, who did a great job getting that started. We're thinking of maybe bringing that here, in-house. Have the soup, maybe get a little bit of Christian stuff in there with it. It might build from there. Doesn't have to be done one time in October. It can be done more than that. But you'd be surprised what a warm bowl of soup and maybe extra coats or mittens might do. So yes, we don't want to just be a food depository. We're looking at it to be more hands-on, meet you, see you again, and hopefully that builds from that. If that helps you with that.
When I look at the three options, I reflect on what I'd like to see for my family and the church families here. And I want us to be a church that I want to invite my friends to that don't have a church. And I kind of align that thought with, are we doing things that I would want to invite people to? What are we doing that is attractive to people who want to serve and want to be a part of a community? I feel like all of us feel really good about our own community, or maybe we could use some more fulfillment within our own community. But if we're not doing things that are attracting people that we want to invite people to, then I don't feel that there's going to be growth, and there's not going to be the financial growth that we hope to get from all of this effort. And our glaring reality is that we don't have enough people saying that they will run these programs or do things. So staff has to do it, and we have to hire staff, in my opinion. We have to hire staff to lead these. And Scott used the words plug in. So this summer we ran a service project, and we set it up. I set it up and sent out the information, and people plugged in. And there's success with that, but that needs to be on a much broader scale to get people to come and to enjoy it and to be fulfilled, and then come back again and enjoy it and be fulfilled and give. And staff is required. It can't, in my opinion, it can't be volunteer driven. There's not enough. And the staff has to be invested, and there's with long-term vision, in my opinion.
So I have a number of thoughts, if you'll bear with me. First one, the first option, right, of, what is it called again? Legacy, right, thank you. Emotionally, of course, I don't want to do that. I like this church. I've been a part of this church for years. I like the community we have. I'd like to see our community grow. I don't like option one. The engineering mathematician side of me, though, looks at this and says, Christianity is dwindling across the world. There just aren't as many people carrying the Christian flag and going to church. Fewer people means you need fewer churches. Somebody's gonna have to shut down. On the one hand, it could be us. Again, I don't want that. Emotionally, I don't want that. Logically, I see it as a real option. We could close down for a month or two and say, everybody go out to other churches in our community and find a new home. Maybe we all find 6 churches that we all, yep, these are the ones that we're all kind of, this is where we would end up. So let's sell it all off, let's take that money, divide it 6 ways, and there's our legacy. It's a realistic option. It wouldn't take much effort on our part to do it. Emotionally, I want the mission option. That's the one I want. However, just as Becca alluded to, and as Scott alluded to, right, the design team, right, here are these options that we've got before us. We couldn't get anybody to look into option 1. We got a couple of people who were strapped for time to look into option 2. We got nobody to volunteer to look into option 3. If we're, as a community, if we are not willing to actually go out and make it happen, it sort of doesn't matter what we choose, because it won't happen. SE is about to shut down fellowship because they can't get people to host it. Like, we can't even get people to host the coffee after church for ourselves. We barely squeaked across the line, from my understanding, just across the line, for actually running Sunday school on Sunday. We got just enough volunteers to say, okay, everybody better show up for it to happen. Otherwise, there are going to be holes and it's not going to go very well. These are the current things that I would think that we enjoy and that we like to do. And we can't do it for ourselves right now. I am petrified of the lack of volunteerism, and yet all of us, in many ways, from what I've heard from people, we want the other option, to volunteer to make this thing happen. Only nobody wants to volunteer for it. So I am utterly petrified about that. I want 3. And I'm really nervous that 1 is the right choice. However, so this is where, again, like I said, I had a bunch of ideas running around in my head, and so y'all bear with me. The other thing, though, the food insecurity, yes, on the one hand, it's easy to sort of fall into we're going to be a food pantry and people will come and collect canned goods when they need them, right? And it's been pointed out, a lot of people look at this. And it was also pointed out that food insecurity, a lot of people are doing it, and yet it's still a problem, right? It's a realistic mission that we could go into. I think there are certain seeds that have been planted, wasn't hoping for that metaphor, and there it is. There are certain seeds that have been planted around our church in certain ways that I think can culminate in that sort of a driving mission, right? The garden that has been out there, I see that as a way to leverage things, right? We could grow things. We could get the youth involved in maintaining it in certain ways and other folks maintaining it. We've been donating a lot of that food to World Relief. I think there are potential further connections and avenues that we can go with World Relief. I think that makes a lot of sense, right? Right? We've discovered that they don't want canned goods, right? The refugees are not used to canned goods, right? They don't do that, right? They're used to fresh produce. That's what they know how to use. I think it's plausible, however very American, to set up a program with World Relief to use our kitchen. Let's form some educational outreach and like bring them in. Let's teach them how to do that, right? As Americans, we are much more used to canned goods. We could offer some courses and classes there in certain ways. I think there are a number of, again, not just like we put shelves and there's food and they will come, right? We built that and they will come. I think there are other avenues that can be opened through the sort of food mission as a potential massive mission. I know a number of people are nervous about, a lot of others are doing the same thing. Sort of, again, I think if you had to boil it down to 2 words, we came up with food mission, but I think that can express itself in a variety of other ways. We just need to be creative in what those ways look like. So, sorry, a lot I said, a lot that didn't quite meet up, but there it all is. So.
One reason that we talked about food insecurity as an option, and that's all it is because to an extent there's a structure out there already. I went to Churches United. I think I'm the only person in this group who's retired, so I went by myself, although I invited others to come, and talked to them about this church becoming a Churches United meal site. They were very excited. They have lost many meal sites during the pandemic, and they would help us. They would connect us to other churches who would make meals and come in. We've done it. We've done it at Mount Zion. We've done it in Davenport. A church comes in with the meal, serves it, cleans up, and leaves. If we decided to do that, they said there was a need 7 days a week. That sounded kind of intimidating. But they would take whatever schedule we could offer, and they would connect us to partners. That's just one way to address need in the community, and it might not bring people in the same way that some of Russ's ideas would. But with our limited number of volunteers and our limited amount of time, connecting to someone that already exists and a program that already exists seemed like a good thing to think about.
Hi, I'm Kimberly Dyer. And I would like to say that I support the massive mission, and I see it as absolutely necessary, but not sufficient. So we have to have something that makes us excited to serve, to bring us part of the community, to bring us together, to help guide us. I think we've been struggling for 4 or 5 years. We haven't felt our purpose. We haven't felt the call of God in the work that we do as much as we should, as much as we could, the opportunity. I think we have to have a massive mission, whether it's food insecurity or we do something else there. That needs to happen for us to thrive. But I don't think that's sufficient. And this is the part that people don't like to talk about. If I could bring the slides back up, or if you can remember them in your head, the deficit, the orange bar of 130,000, a massive mission, and the little blue pieces that added back up, the massive mission helps our current members be engaged. We can probably get 10% more, and it might help attract new members, and those were 2 chunks. But those 2 chunks did not add up to the whole deficit. We needed shared staff or shared building or other things. Like this building, I think we have to face the reality of we either have to leave the building or we have to make revenue off the building. We are not using this building to its extent. Like we have a ton of space and a ton of hours in the week, and we use very few of the spaces, very few of the hours of the week. And so even with a massive mission, which I think is necessary, I do not think we can survive without the massive mission. But if we have the massive mission, I think our finances will still slowly dwindle away. It will be slower than the 5 to 6 years, but it might be 10 to 12 years because we're not addressing the big financial hole that we have there. And so I'm not a proponent of, I see good points for either. Maybe we should recognize and say, we don't have enough of us to create the energy we need to get to where we have enough people to volunteer, and maybe leaving a legacy and closing our church is the right choice. I don't know that answer because I don't know what all of you are willing to do and wanting to do, and I know that I only have so much time to give, and I can't help with all of it. So I think we need to think about, if we're going to do this, if we're going to go with massive mission, that can't be the only part. There is the boring work. No one wants to spend time trying to get some yoga instructor to come rent out the basement every Wednesday night, and a different group to rent out the kitchen in the evenings to do cooking classes, since we rented it in the mornings, right? But if we can't find someone to do that work, or we don't think it's worth hiring staff to do that work, then I think that's a sign that we don't have the right things set up for success. So I just want us to be realistic with ourselves, and I think something to engage us and enthuse us and mission work that we all want to work on is necessary. We can't do without that, but I don't think we can do without paying attention to the finances either, and the reality of our buildings needs, it costs money, and we're not bringing in enough money to cover that cost. So.
Thanks for that. That's yeah, I think that last point there of trying to figure out the building thing, I don't know how we tie that into these different options. I definitely still think we have to make a concerted effort to draw a line and pick one of these things, and then how do we continue on with that?
In relationship to the pandemic, one of the big things was we didn't have night. Because Red Wagon is here, I have a question for you. Is it possible for us to have daycare at night? I know that there are people who work and they don't have a place to take their children at night for care. Is that an option of something that we could provide? And would we get any income off of doing that? Red Wagon's clean at night? Oh, that's clean at night?
The comment was it was cleaned. It's cleaned during the night, right? That's the response.
Okay. I just want to make a comment before I really. Oh, sorry. Before I really feel comfortable voting on the massive mission, I'm just curious if we've done enough background study. I mean, has massive mission saved other churches? Is this something that we believe is successful because it's been demonstrated somewhere else? I think I'd feel more comfortable kind of knowing that there's some background rooted in that. If we don't have a path that adds 50 to 100 new pledges, it's not enough. I think to Kimberly's point, I hope that when we talk about massive, we got to talk about massive as putting us on that path. I personally think that and whether or not the massive mission is the right thing to do, I think in my mind it hinges on those couple of things. But I also think a termed pastor and some of these other pieces, like they don't sound great to me. I want a pastor that's going to come in here and care about FCC in Moline, the community in Moline, the people in this church, and I want him to plan to be here for forever. And I get that our finances are, projected to go down, but I gotta feel like we're in as good of a financial shape as a lot of the other churches in this neighborhood, if not considerably better, at least today. So if we can get somebody to help us carry that flag, nurture what we need in this church, invite our friends, I think that we can build on that as a part of the foundation of us going forward. And then the massive mission, I don't, I wanna buy into that, but I want that to be a key to success, not another financial burden.
Yeah, I don't. If you want me to respond, I can't answer that. I don't know if it's going to work, right? I don't have a grand master plan that says we're going to attract 50 new members or whatever it is. I think it's on us to make it work, right? That's the risk that we have to take, and I think we have to decide as a congregation, is it worth that risk? The term pastor, I don't. Again, I'm not an expert on this. What I've been told, and if anybody else knows better than I, please speak up. But what I'm told is, because of the financial situation we're in, it's not like an indefinite that we can go out and hire somebody indefinitely. I'm told that it has to be a termed, because that's all we can guarantee with the trajectory that we're on. So again, I don't know that, but I'm just repeating what I've heard.
the world has gone through a tremendous thing in the last 2 years, and it's not just us that's been affected, the whole world has been affected. Look how many members we have lost just in the last couple of years. And a lot of our senior people have died out. And we had a wonderful church here for years and years. But look what the world has gone through the last 2 years. We've got this fabulous, fabulous church. The reputation of this church had that for over 100 years. And that let's try to find somebody that can share this church. We're not unique in not having a largest congregation that we once had. So we're down, but look what we've gone through the last 2 years. So we are suffering. We've lost many wonderful people. And maybe they'll come back if they see that we've got a little life and that. But we also need to share. We had the congregators. We had dinner clubs. We had many things that brought people in and fellowship. And our women provided wonderful, wonderful bazaars. We were known all throughout the community. People came from miles away. And Robert Miller got rid of all of them because when we had, I lost his name, that was here for many years, that he loved us and we loved him. He wasn't an administrator, but we worked together. And so we need somebody who works together. The church over here, they had potluck suppers every Thursday night. They had calling teams going out to meet the people that had needs. So we're not meeting the needs, but we don't have the people. We have wonderful people here still, but it's shrunk in size. So if we could find somebody to share our building that we already have. We have one of the finest churches in the whole community. We have assets here. So let's find somebody that has the same needs we have to share the cost of the building. That's, I think, our biggest problem. We don't have enough money. They've been taught over there, they tithe automatically when we're closed and the church is closed and no one's here, the money drops off. Their money still comes in even though they were shut down for a while. So there's something wrong with something here, but we've got the asset. Let's try to get our money, get somebody to share this beautiful church, which will give us more money, and then we can start some of these other services to get people back in here. We have to offer some life, not money, life, and somebody to care. When we get a new pastor that says, I don't call on the people, that's not my responsibility. And I think all the years that they went out and called on everybody every week, they had the same people that volunteered, but they were willing to do it. So it isn't always, I know we're small now, but Joan gets more from her little small church than most people get from a big church. So I don't think size has to do with it. We just need to get some money in here, and we've got the asset of the church, and I think that's where we could get it.
Yeah, I want to ask you to give me the names of the congregations you suggested we contact regarding sharing our space with.
Right across the street. And I talked to Sally, and I talked to Pastor Becky this week, and Sally was going to talk to the committee. I will talk to her again, and then I've got the phone numbers, and I have the names all written down, and I gave them the text.
Jan, are you talking about the Episcopal Anglican Church?
I'm going to ask that we have this conversation offline because we've got a lot of people here kind of waiting. First, I share Josh's concern about the lack of volunteers. I will also say, though, that if you want volunteers, you have to do more than post a note on the billboard. You have to ask people. Otherwise, everybody thinks someone else will do it, and so nobody responds. I am very concerned about that also, but I'm not sure that we have done it in a way that brings people forth. And I do think I've heard the term come up several times, termed pastor, and I would like to ask the design team if they would be willing to accept a resolution added to their agenda for the 28th for a yes or no on whether to call a termed pastor. I would like, you know, our pastors have been termed whether we did it or not. I mean, I don't think we've kept one more than 4 years in the past 2 or 3 times. So, but anyway, I would like to add a resolution to the meeting for the 28th, yes or no, that we start the search process. And so the question is, would the design team allow that, accept that?
Does it have to be termed? Can we look into
It doesn't have to be termed.
Okay, can we just look into like maybe at UCC like?
Well, the question is, should we start the process or not?
Okay, turned or not?
So that's
Well, I think we kind of answered that already, though, right? I mean, each of the 3 options was.
none of those included the pastoral search to my knowledge. Well, did any of those 3 options include that we start the search process? Which one, the 3rd one? Okay, I'm unclear on that.
So when when we put the termed pastors up there, first and foremost, before you start a call, the search committee, you have to know where you're going. And that's where those 3 options kind of come in at. And it's not saying that, you know, we're just gonna, you know, start the call when we, you know, somewhere kind of figure out where we're going. We really need to know where we're going, because if you want a pastor to even look at this church, you gotta state where you're going. It's kind of like you're writing your resume, and your resume says, this is who I am, right? That's what you guys have to do. So if you're going down the legacy piece, that's what you put on your resume. If you're just swirling, that's what you put on your resume. If you're going massive mission and this is the mission we chose, that's what you put on your resume. Those are 3 different kind of pastors. There are pastors that are intentional in helping churches close with their legacy. There are pastors who will do first calls and kind of help, you know, just continue doing what you're doing. And then there are pastors who are passionate about a certain ministry. You may find a pastor who is very, very passionate about racial equality, focused on refugees, focused on the LGBTQ community, focused on food insecurity, housing insecurity. You're gonna find those kind of, and that's what, gotta remember when I talked about the whole wineskin thing, right? Pastors don't look like they used to look like 50 years ago. When I was at the ordination yesterday, it was the ELCA, it was a female, a woman bishop ordinating a female pastor, and I'm in a group of people who are all either pastors, the bishop, the assistant to the bishop, and they're all female. So think about how pastors have changed over the years, right? So when you think about massive mission, if I was a pastor right now, do you think I would have picked food security? What do you think I would have picked? What? Sexual trafficking, LGBTQ, mental health. I would never have picked up food insecurity because I give food to the local food pantry anyway. But it's those things. So when you think about pastors, that's what that means is massive mission. Those are certain pastors. Then you think about your financial situation. It is termed because that's the only amount you can pay for a pastor at this point and guarantee it. Guaranteed. Exactly. It's not fair to call anyone church. So it's not just about calling a pastor, it's you've got to figure out where you're going before you can even call a pastor and start the search committee. Does that clear up the question?
Thank you, Lindsay. Yeah, I think two pieces to that, right? So we have to figure out where we're going, and I think those options that we have there are high level where we want to go as a congregation. So that's the first piece. And then the term piece, again, I don't want us to get hung up on that thing. I think it's more of a financial piece than anything, right? We're not just saying come in 2 years and like an interim, go, no go type thing, right? That's not what we're saying. The term is only in there because of the potential financial issues. So again, I wouldn't let that get hung up on, don't let that hang you up on, yeah. Yes, thank you. Technical term for the actual call. Thank you, Lindsay. So yeah, don't let that influence your thinking process.
I support what Skip had to say, maybe a different cut on it. I think one of the problems that we're running into right now is we need to know where the goal line is, because we don't have a statement that says by this time we're going to be at this point. And I think that's what Skip is trying to get to. And when we have our next meeting, we should have a mission defined by the church. That's the goal. Is that correct? We should have a statement that we are going to either do the mission, we're going to do legacy, we're going to have one of those options selected. And when one of those options are selected, I think it's reasonable at that time that we at least start putting a profile together. There's information in a profile that is historic. There's some information that can be built as you go along. I think this congregation needs to know that we are moving to a senior pastor. I think without it, we're going to continue to have people say, I'm not willing to put forth the effort. I do think that part of the issue that we have right now is we're just don't have the goal out there. And I know there are others in the church that feel the same way. There are people in this church who are putting a timeline on their participation in the church. And I know there are people who said, at this time, I'm not going to do it anymore. I know of people that are saying at the end of this year, I'm not going to fulfill this this task that I've done for years in the church. So somehow I think the design team should consider putting a stake in the ground so that people know where we're headed. It may not, it doesn't have to be the final solution. It doesn't mean that we've have dotted all the I's, but I think that we are in trouble if we don't be a little more specific and have some specific timelines. In the meeting we had, back in, was it April or May, sometime in there, I think, there was a real request that we needed to put a deadline on when we were going to accomplish things, and that, I believe that request failed by one vote. So that's a real lesson for us that people want to see progress.
I'm not sure I've followed. So I think in two weeks we are going to make a decision, right? That's the line in the sand. Hopefully that's come across. Yep. So we're gonna. I mean, in 2 weeks we'll make a decision, and then I think along with that comes calling a pastor. I don't. Hopefully that's that's clear. I don't know if we haven't said it, that's the intention. And as Lindsay had said, you know, calling a pastor, I mean, it means 3 different types of pastors, whatever direction we decide to go.
I just have a question. I kind of understand that after this choice is made, that the design team is done, correct? And then people are going to have to step up if we choose massive mission and lead that project. And not that I want it, but I just have to say, watching, it seems to me that we're headed for choice 1, whether we want it or not. There just aren't the time, the treasure, or the willingness to give talent to get us out of this. And I hate to say that, but that's my opinion.
Yep, that's a good comment. Yeah, so I think we would need to have people volunteer to, what is this new person, staff, whatever it is, right? Whether it's part-time, full-time, existing people, reorganized, or whatever it may be. Yeah, somebody has to do that work. Yep, you're right. Okay, one more.
I have, what? Oh, boy, I know what you mean about eating this thing. Okay. I've thought long and hard over the many weeks and last few months about this whole thing, and even knowing today was coming, did a lot of thinking last night and in the wee hours. And it's funny, my thinking came out the same way of Joshua and Kimberly. I was thinking a whole bunch of things of where we could go with the mission kind of thing, and the thing with the food, and a lot of other things, trying to attract groups to come in and use our church and that sort of thing. That's kind of like the Joshua side. And then I thought, yeah, but on the other side, and remembering the words of John Dean during Watergate, there's a cancer in the White House, and it's like, yeah, we've got one here, and it's called the budget and the building. And we can do lots of wonderful things, but is it going to solve that other side of it? I don't think so. And as we're talking today, there's a lot of hope, and I can feel that. I also sense a sense of worry. Are we going to make it? Can we do this? Is there an energy drop in this congregation? And there's concern about, well, we tried these different things. We're not getting the volunteers coming in, and so we really have to look hard. What is our energy level? We get a new pastor or whatever. Oh, a lot of us are really going to jump into new programs, and we're going to do this. Are you? Individually? Ask yourself. I want option 2 or 3. But I think if and I'm almost positive that in 2 weeks, we're not going to vote for option 1. So I would ask that you keep option 1 in mind for a year if we don't go with it, and take another very hard look in a year at option 1. Closure is not failure, and what comes after closure is we decide to stay together as a congregation, except we're the ones that do the moving, and we join some other church. We go up to Hope Church or wherever. Or we build another church. Ground level, no basement, no second floor, multipurpose rooms, and we continue as a congregation doing the kinds of things we do in a much smaller, we are a small church now. You're not large, you're not even middle size anymore. We're a small congregation, and we do a lot of great things together and thrive. I told a couple other people at some other churches what our current deficit was here this year, and they said, "Oh, that's what our church budget is for the year." I was like, "Oh, I forgot that budgets can be that small and still thrive." So, option 1, closure, does not mean end. It just means the closure of this facility and this property, and finding a new way to still be together as a congregation somehow, somewhere else. It's an excellent piece of property. It's a great building. There are some other options that involve closure rather than just that's the end. Nice knowing you, nice being with you all these years. Good luck wherever you go. Doesn't have to be that way. So yeah, I like option 2 and 3, but keep one in mind because that might be hard reality. Sorry, I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, but that's, you know, somebody's got to say it, so I did it.
This is coming from Bill Henning, and I'm sure Nancy has part of this too. Search committee now, cast our net out. Stop trying to define ourselves. I agree with Russ and Steve.
Yeah, I think we've covered that. Yep. Okay. Yeah, so we're over almost an hour and a half in here, so we'll close it off here in a second. Just maybe, do you want to do a closing? Okay. Let me just say a few comments, and then Lindsay will close us out here, and then yeah. So I guess biggest thanks for coming. I mean, a lot of people here listening to me and me ramble, but others with some great thoughts and ideas. Appreciate everybody willing to speak up. I mean, we're still not aligned yet. You see that, right? I mean, there's a lot of differing opinions here, so take some time to think on, you know, what this really means. I think from when we get to a voting perspective, we'll have to send something out to clarify some of these, what they really mean about calling a pastor, and, you know, is it really food or nothing else? I don't think that's quite the case. So we'll try to clarify a little bit of that through email as well, just so we don't get hung up on some of those minute details of whether that's a go or no go for you on those different options. So again, thank you. And did you have another final? I'm not an expert on Robert's rules, so I need help with that. So I've asked the leadership team, and
Well, I would assume it's either vote by hand or it would be vote by ballot. You could do it with a runoff, in that you would have to have at least 50% for one choice.
I don't know. We'll have to get some guidance from some experienced folks on how we do that, because I can't answer that.
We have to make sure we include the people who are watching.
Yeah, so the comment was make sure we include the people that are remote, calling in or on FaceTime or Facebook, whatever, YouTube. I'm too old. Okay, thanks again. Lindsay, you want to close us out?
I think collectively we could probably all take a big deep breath. Good and gracious God, you brought us all here today. We sat here, we had conversation. We heard you say that sometimes it just looks different, or things don't hold up, or we have to see it in a different perspective. We talked about mission. There's so many that sit on our hearts. We talked about our existence, who we are, where you're calling us. We have the design team who have given so much work. They have pushed all their passion to the front line. have set things aside to give everything. Our three options that are sitting in front of us are that options. We pray for us to walk out of here and take that time over the next couple weeks to discern. Really think deep down. God is in our heart, our soul, our mind. When we take that breath in, bring in new life, and think with all of your being and discern the options that are in front of you. And know that wherever we are God's children. Amen.